I've never watched a 7-year-old die, but Temple Abernathy was convinced that he was dying that day. His older brother Lewis had gone off and left him alone in the desert, looking for their horses who had wandered off in the night, searching for water to drink. And as this boy sat and reflected on the thousands of miles and the dozens of days that had passed up until that present moment, it occurred to him, he heard a sound in the distance. Now, before I tell you what he heard, I need to take you back to the beginning. You see, some weeks prior to that moment, the boy's father, Jack, was in New York talking to two men, promoters, by the last name of Lundy and Thompson. And well, as grown men have a tendency to do when they're spinning yarns together, trying to outdo one another, the men asked him, "Jack, do you truly believe that your boys, ages 7 and 11, could ride 60 miles a day on horseback?" Well, yes, not only do I believe they could, I believe they would if they had a reason to. Well, Mr. Abernathy, do you believe that your boys could ride coast to coast from New York to California in 60 days? Gentlemen, do we have ourselves a challenge? Oh, no, no, Mr. Abernathy. We have ourselves a bet. And if your boys can do it, we'll pay them $10,000. What do you say? Well, gentlemen, it doesn't sound like we have a bet. Sounds like we have a deal. And with that, at 1 minute after midnight, August of 1911, with the flask in their hands, the boys rowed out knee-deep into the Atlantic Ocean. And they filled that flask with salt water, and the race was on. Now, they would remember later that, well, the first several days of the race were the hardest on the horses. Well, because most of it was across pavement. There were a few minor mishaps along the way. There was the accusation of trespassing and the mayor who wanted photos for his small town for publicity's sake. And, well, there was a major mishap too. One of the boys' horses got into a stand of alfalfa and foundered. He ate too much and died. All the while, the boys kept this thought in the back of their mind: if we're not careful, we'll lose this bet. So this one particular day in the high deserts of Utah, they surmised among themselves, if we could ride a little harder and push ourselves and the horses a little further, we just might get ahead and win this race. So this one particular day, they rode over 100 miles, almost double the daily allotment. And they were so exhausted when they stopped in the dark that night that they slipped off their horses. They ate a scant meal and fell fast asleep. And it was Temple, the 7-year-old, who was the first to realize the next morning when they woke up, there was a frightful sound. Silence. Oh no, the horses. The horses are gone. And it was Lewis, the 11-year-old, who spoke up and took blame. Oh, any experienced horseman knows you tie your horses down. You at least tie them off or tie them to themselves. You hobble them so they don't wander off, which is exactly what the boys didn't do, and it's exactly what the horses did. Now, the boys have a new challenge: to not die. So they came up with a plan. We'll go a few miles in opposite directions, not too far, mind you, from camp. We hardly have any food and water. We'll come back, we'll report of our findings until we Lord willing, find our horses. And on this went for the first day, to no avail. Into the second day, still no horses. Into the third day, and it was Temple, the 7-year-old, who was the first to succumb to the heat and dehydration. He would take a few steps and become dizzy. He couldn't go on, and he told his other brother, Lewis, you have to find the horses. I can't. And so that's exactly what he did. He wandered off and left Temple alone in camp. And as he sat and reflected on the thousands of miles and the dozens of days that had passed up until that present moment, he was looking for something, anything to comfort his mind. And he found distraction in his sweat. Drip, drop, drip, drip. The droplets of water seemed to be flowing down him in slow motion, and it reminded him of a scene, something he had seen in New York, Niagara Falls, these droplets of water falling in what seemed like slow motion from the falls seemed so powerful. And now this boy felt so powerless. And it occurred to him, he heard a sound. And he looked up just in time to see his brother riding up on one of the horses. And the day was saved. Today was not the day to die. Oh, and the race was back on. They rode doubles, saddled up, carried one of the saddles with them, and off they rode till they came to the top of a plateau. And they looked down below, and wouldn't you know, there was the second horse. They saddled up and on they rode into present-day Nevada till they came to a familiar sight and a sound they had not heard since they were back east. A steam locomotive, a steel stallion. Came to a stop, and off came a group of men, and they said, we know who you boys are. You're the Abernathy kids. We were told to keep a watch out for you. We know why you're out here. By the way, how's that race going? The boys said, well, we lost our horses. We almost lost our lives. And we're afraid we lost about 3 days. We might not win that bet after all. Well, the men, they came up with an idea. They said, listen, you put your horses in the boxcar. You can ride up front with us. We'll give you a 3-day lift. Nobody has to know because we won't tell them, and you just might win. Well, now, nobody has to know. It was Lewis, the 11-year-old, who spoke up. Gentlemen, no one else may know, but we would know. Thank you, but no, you may go. And with that, off the steam locomotive went, and the boys rode on. They came to the Sierra Nevada mountains. They rode to, through, over, until they came to San Francisco's Golden Gate Park. They found their way down into the Pacific, and oh, by the way, you know what they never lost while they were in the desert? That's right. That flask full of salt water. They poured it out. And with that, the race was over. The only problem is they lost. They hadn't made it in 60 days. They made it in 62 days. I was asked a lot as a boy, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? And I believe these boys, they'd want us to ask a better question. What would you do even if you knew you would fail? Would you finish?